And yeah, I would like to invite our next speaker, Юрій Погорецький, who is my fellow Ukrainian, and he made all the way here, which took quite some time to make it to м.Севілья from Kyiv. And Yuri will talk about military sомнологія as a new emerging discipline during the wartime.
Not conflict in this conference. Dear Mr. Chairman, dear colleagues, guests, and participants, I would like to express my sincere gratitude from Ukraine for the invitation and the opportunity to participate in the Congress Harris report for your attention. Military sомнологія as a new discipline in the modern world, current challenges and lessons from the war in Ukraine. The need for sомнологічal research and a gaining of practical experience in diagnosing and treating sleep disorders in the context of war in Ukraine as an extremely important issue for the development of medicine in Ukraine, Europe, and around the world. This is an important task because we have long known about two-way correlation between sleep and mental disorders such as anxiety and PTSD. In this presentation, we will outline key public health elements that are uniquely characteristic for war-affected countries, including sleep disorders in soldiers, civilians, and children. We will also demonstrate ways to solve the sомнологічal needs in Ukraine at war. The scale of problem is hard to overestimate. According to the latest research by the Ministry of Health of Ukraine, approximately 90% of Ukrainians have at least one of the symptoms that lead to the need for psychological help. The number of patients diagnosed with PTSD in Ukraine is growing. Over the past 2 years, the electronic healthcare system has recorded a significant increase in patients diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorders. The main manifestation of PTSD is sleep disturbance. For example, slide 2 shows that according to the National Health Service of Ukraine in 2023, the number of patients with PTSD almost quadrupled compared to 2021. And please note that for the first 2 months of 2024, almost the same number of patients were diagnosed with PTSD as in the whole year of 2021. And it is likely that the figures for the end of 2024 will be much worse. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, sleep disorders among the civilian population have been gaining momentum. Regular nighttime air raids, shielding of civilians, displacement due to war or chronic stress and anxiety lead to sleep disorders. The number of air alarms, where, how many, how long. Slide shows that the critical days are Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. As for the hours, the number of alarms increased late in the evening with a maximum peak at night and early in the morning, according to the official sources, namely the Telegram channel Air Alarms in UAE, Airborne Alarm Statistic. In total, as September 21, 2024, more than 47,000 airborne alarms were recorded. 46,000 in the regions and 1,300 in Kyiv. The longest air raid alarm lasted for 50 hours in Kharkov. The most frequent alarms were in Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, Дніпропетровськ, Харків. Slide 4 shows the most common symptoms of stress among Ukrainians, the total number, and those who stayed in their homes, moved within Ukraine, and went abroad. According to the Gradus Research Survey, the most common symptoms of stress are sleep disturbances, 63%, and insomnia, 45%. Data as of 4 May 2022. Slide 5 shows the number of people who have experienced stress. 82% of respondents experienced stress. Slide 6 shows the main causes of stress. Please note that the dominant causes of stress are the war, 77%, the threat of escalation, 56%, and hostilities near the place of residence, 40%. Panic and stress from COVID took the last honorable place, 2%. According to a Gradus Research survey conducted in 2022 and October 2023, 47% of Ukrainians reported about sleep disorders at a negative condition the way had experienced recently in 2022, 41%. These demonstrate that as the war continues, problems with sleep disorders will only increase. Anxiety and sleep disorders were among the most frequent mental health-related reasons for Ukrainians to seek medical care in 2023, with 66,500 and 42,800 people seeking help from healthcare institutions, respectively, according to the Ministry of Health. Most complaints about mental health problems came from women, more 72,000 women. More than 19,000 children had the same complaints. Slide 7 shows other most frequent reasons for visiting doctors for mental health issues. The dominant reason for treatment was psychological problems. Soldiers and residents of the areas where active hostilities are taking place sleep less than 5 hours on average. They are experiencing an increase in sleep deprivation due to frequent nighttime bombing. The frequency of complaints about sleep disorders that people cannot correct on their own has increased. Phobias, anxiety, panic, and depression have increased too, especially among people who have left the area where active hostilities are taking place and have experienced great exhaustion and stress. Slide 8 shows the number of damaged healthcare facilities according to Ministry of the Health. According to the Ministry of Health, as of April 24, 2024, in more than 2 years of full-scale war, Russia has damaged 1,581 medical institutions and completely destroyed 210. This includes the destruction of sleep laboratories in Donetsk, Lugansk, and Mariupol. Please note that all other sleep laboratories in Ukraine are constantly operating under regular night bombing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Of course, patients and doctors follow instructions to keep them alive. This causes additional sleep deprivation during the PSG. That's why the idea of creating sleep laboratories in special bomb shelters came up. On April 27, 2024, the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine adopted order number 262 on approval of amendments to the regulation of military medical expertise in the armed forces of Ukraine, Article 22. The list includes episodic and paroxysmal disorders G40 to G47, sleep disorders, including sleep apnea. This is very important for all medicine in Ukraine because it expands horizons and accelerates the development of somnology. The somnological mentality of doctors and the nation is growing. Thus, in Ukraine, during the war, a revolution in the development of somnology is taking place. The National Health Service of Ukraine has expanded the list of free medical services for 2023 and added two new packages. In particular, the following were added: comprehensive rehabilitation, care for adults and children in inpatient setting, support and treatment of adults and children with mental disorders at the primary level of medical care. In 33, all of new program in Ukraine, please checking. And the Ukrainian Association of Sleep Medicine, USAIM, was established in Ukraine in 2010 and continues to work actively. The total number of members of the association is 300 doctors. USAIM successfully cooperates in Ukraine with such sleep societies as European Sleep Medicine and Neurophysiology Association, ESMANA, and Ukrainian League Against Epilepsy. The Ministry of Health of Ukraine has already implemented a number of modern European somnologic standards in cardiology, neurology, pulmonology, endocrinology, and pediatrics. As for the somnologic issue of diagnosis and treatment of sleep and sleep disorders, breathing disorders in soldiers and veterans, we can only say one thing for now. During the war, the topic is classified for communication. Sorry. But we confirm that the work is being done and has its own development program. And in order to organize scientific research in this area in the military, we urge your dear colleagues to join in and help. During the war, 10 times more sleep laboratories were open than in the last 20 years. This is a huge base for scientific research has been created, but there is not enough funding for this program. We will be sincerely grateful for your advice in this issue. Access to somnology resources in Ukraine to solve sleep problems caused by war is currently very limited. Therefore, there is an urgent need to create a new sub-discipline and research which should be military somnology. The main goals of military somnology in Ukraine to gain scientific knowledge and practical skills related to military somnology. Introduction to the technologies for the diagnosis and treatment of sleep and sleep breathing disorders in every military hospital and in children's and adult hospitals in every major city. Collection of scientific data, bringing together interested parties, scientists, and specialists in military somnology in Europe. European values are important to us in Ukraine, and we, doctors, understand see as never before the primary importance and prospects of broad international scientific research and the introduction of somnologic European standards in Ukrainian medicine at the present stage. Under your leadership and with the help of ESRS members, an important historical step in the development of military somnology in Ukraine and medicine around the world can be made. Doctors and patients of Ukraine will be grateful to you for the timely step taken by the ESRS to accept the Ukrainian Association of Sleep Medicine into its ranks. Dear President, dear colleagues, dear friends, and like-minded people, on behalf of the UMS members, I am writing to you with a request to consider the possibility of joining the ESRS. We hope that our appeal will be supported by you. Thank you for your attention. I hope for fruitful cooperation, exchange of scientific experience and practical ideas in military somnology. This is extremely important in order to bring healthy sleep back to Ukrainians. And I am deeply convinced that this will happen. And I am deeply convinced that we will do it together. So let's go to victory together.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Yuri. I'd like to invite any questions or comments, please. Please, Anton.
Thank you for presenting. Just a quick comment as a quick response to your call. I'm also Ukrainian, and we have data on cross-sectional, about the data about the civilians. We also have heart rate-based daily measurements. So I'm currently working in the sleep lab in Austria, Salzburg, and let's join our efforts because I think we have something to offer each other. Thank you.
But can you tell a bit more? What kind of data?
So the cross-sectional data is the questionnaire-based data, and the daily continuous data is the heart rate-based data, which includes the standardized sleep measurements, sleep onset latency, wake after sleep onset, time in bed, total sleep time, and a couple sleep efficiency, of course. So if you know Manuel Shabus, the Sleep2 app, it's basically based on their algorithm.
Anytime welcome.
Я підійду до вас потім пізніше. Дякую.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments, please? Okay, if not for now, thank you very much, Yuri.
Thank you for attention. Please. Welcome to Ukraine after the war, but please to start new research, military somnology. In this moment, to start, please.
Thank you.